Just wait for a couple more minutes for others to join and then start the session. The session now. A very good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this first live interactive session for the course on sustainable transportation systems offered by NPTEL. I am Sedu Vinayagam, a PhD scholar in the Civil Engineering Department at IIT Madras. So I'll be conducting these interactive sessions regularly every week at the same time on Sundays 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So the idea behind conducting these sessions is, to help understand the concepts that are taught in the course and clear any doubts that you may have. and also to help you practice some questions related to the concepts that are taught, and therefore help you, solve the assignments that are released every week. That will help you, score better marks in the exam. Okay, so we'll be doing these sessions regularly, so please make use of these sessions, and then it will help you to do the assignments better. Okay, so with that, we'll start the session for week 1. So let's take a look at what was taught in week 1 of this course. Right, so there were 5 lectures. So this week was more about setting the context for the sustainable transportation system. Right, so we were provided with some basic information. Right, we also looked at some history. So in the first lecture of this week, so we got an introduction to the transportation systems. In particular, we were looking at the evolution of transport modes. So the different types of transportation modes and how the technological, improvements happened, and how it led to the evolution of the transportation mode from, the earliest form, which was, walking, to the present day modes, right? So we looked at different modes of transportation systems as well, right? Not just one form. We looked at, the road transport, we looked at water transport, airways, railways, and so on, right? That was in the lecture 1. So in lecture 2, so we moved a little bit technical. So we looked at what is a transportation system, what makes up a transportation system, right? And what are the different modes of a transportation system, right? And then we also looked at what are the factors that we need to consider, or what affects the efficiency of a transportation system. The third lecture, we moved into defining sustainability, understanding sustainability in a general sense. So what is the concept of sustainability? What are the goals that we have defined for this concept of sustainability, achieving the sustainability? And then more into the context of transportation system. How is a sustainable transportation system, how it should be? And we also looked at some examples, that are given for sustainable transportation systems. Then in the fourth lecture, so we moved, to the context that we are more interested in, that is the Indian transport sector, right? What are the current issues and challenges that we are facing in today's world, and what are these some of these strategies that have already been adopted, in our country to tackle these challenges, right? So we looked at some of these examples as well. And then in the final lecture of week 1, we looked at climate change, right? So one of the most discussed topics, right? So that requires immediate attention as well, right? So we looked at climate change, and then what are the indicators of climate change, right? And also what is the relationship of the transportation sector with the climate change that we are dealing with today, right? So this was what we saw in the week 1. Right, so with in this, some questions related to these concepts will be discussed in this session today. Okay, this will be similar to what you will be facing in the assignments as well, right? So how we will do this is I'll bring up one question on the screen, and then I'll create a poll in Google Meet, and then I want each of you to take a minute or two to think about the question and then answer the poll. Okay, then if you have any questions, we will discuss that. Okay, so with that, we'll start with the first question for this week. So question 1 is, a maglev vehicle rides on an air cushion based on the principle of dash. So we have 4 options. Number 1 is chemical reaction. Number 2, fuel combustion. Number 3, electromagnetic reaction. And number 4 is photochemical reaction. Okay, so now I'll create a poll. Okay, I have launched a poll, so you should be able to access it through the activities option in the Google Meet. So once you are ready with your answer, you can pick one of the 4 options. Yeah, and then once you have answered, we'll discuss it. Yeah, I want each one of you to, answer and participate. Okay, so that it will be better for you. Okay, it's okay if you need a minute or two, you can think and answer. Okay, I have two responses so far in the poll. Okay, any other answers from anyone? Okay, so now let's take a look at the answer. So the two responses I have received are for option C, and C is indeed the right answer. So it's electromagnetic reaction, right? So a Maglev vehicle rides on an air cushion based on the principle of electromagnetic reaction, right? So what's Maglev is basically a abbreviation for magnetic levitation, right? So we have a set of electromagnets on the tracks, right? So these electromagnets, provide a repulsive force which helps to push the train of the track, right? So the train is pushed above the track because of this electromagnetic reaction, and therefore we have an air cushion between the vehicle and the tracks, right? So what does this help us to do? So because there is no physical contact now, the friction between the train and the tracks are removed, right? So that helps us to achieve higher speeds, right? So when we look at it, the earliest or the greatest invention that we had, the first greatest one is the invention of wheel for the transportation, right? So why is it considered great? Because it helped us to move things quicker, right? So it reduced the effort needed to move the vehicles or move the goods. Why? Because the wheel has a very little uh, contact with the ground, right? So it contacts the ground at a single point, right? So that greatly reduced the friction that we had, and therefore it made it easier to move around, right? And this magnetic levitation takes it one step further, that now there is no physical contact at all. Even that little contact that we had with the circular design of the wheel, even that is now removed, and therefore we are now able to achieve much higher speeds with this maglev, right? So that's the concept behind a maglev vehicle, right? Now going on to question 2. So blimps are a part of dash mode of transportation systems. So option A is air transport, option B water transport, option C cable transport, and option D road transport. Okay, the poll is launched. Okay, for those who joined late, okay, it's left. All right, so we have 3 votes for option A. Right, so the right option is option A. It is air transport, right? So blimps is basically, like an airship, right? It's a, you can think of it like as an air balloon, a big air balloon. So it's an airship, right? So which is basically it rises up because of by filling it with lighter gas like helium, right? So when you are filling it with a lighter gas, so these blimps, so they rise up in the air, and that's one of the modes of transportation systems, right? So what's interesting about the blimps is that it doesn't have any rigid structure for its the upper body of this vehicle, right? So it's just the inflation pressure from the the helium gas that's used that gives it the shape that we see, right? So that's an interesting aspect of this particular mode of transportation. And yeah, obviously since it flies, so it's a part of a air transportation system, right? So that's why the right answer is option A. Okay, question number 3 is the generation of hazardous materials is a negative externality of unsustainable development. So we have to say whether this statement is true or false. Okay, we have 3 votes for option A. Okay, so the right option is option A. It is true, right? So we are here talking about unsustainable development, right? So we are talking about negative externality. So what is an externality? It is nothing but an effect of a process or product that you are using, right? So externality is basically an indirect effect of this unsustainable development as we are talking here. So a negative externality is something that which an effect that we do not desire, right? So generation of hazardous materials is a negative externality of unsustainable development. So it's correct because when you are talking about sustainability, so one of the aspect is the environmental protection, right? So the generation of hazardous material, it's going to negatively impact our environment. So it's a negative effect of unsustainability, right? Therefore the given statement is correct. So question number 4 is the total number of sustainable development goals SDGs adopted by the United Nations is dash. So the options are 11, 14, 17, 20. Okay, so we have 3 votes for option C, 17, and it is correct, option C, 17, right? So generally when we think of sustainability, the first thing that comes to our mind is the environment, right? So the pollution and those aspects of it, right? But if you look at the sustainable development goals as adopted by the United Nations, there are 17 categories, right? So 17 different goals. So these cover various aspects, or various dimensions, right? So starting from no poverty, you know no hunger and so on. It looks at various aspects like health and well-being, education, right? Also the environment, climate change, aquatic life on land, and so on, right? So there is a very comprehensive set of goals that is adopted by the United Nations, and there are 17 of them, right? So the right answer is C. So question number 5 is the government of India introduced the National Urban Transport Policy NUTP in the year dash. So the options are 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006. Okay, so we have 3 votes for option D, 2006. Right, so the right option is option D, 2006. Right, so this National Urban Transport Policy is also one of the strategies or actions that's taken by our government for addressing the challenges that we are seeing in our transport sector. Right, so what's this National Urban Transport Policy? So it's basically a policy that was brought in to create a framework that is framework for providing sustainable mobility for sustainable mobility for the future, right? So how are we going to improve our transportation system in a sustainable way, or how should we do it, right? So it provides a framework for us to work with, right? So it talks about integrating the land use planning along with the transportation systems, right? So transportation development together with land use planning. So, and also other aspects like providing equitable access to the different segments of the society, right? So all these aspects are put together in a framework that can be used for providing sustainable mobility, right? So that's the National Urban Transport Policy brought in the year of 2006. Okay, question number 6 is the basic principles of sustainability do not include dash. Option A is protecting biodiversity. Option B is maximizing the use of non-renewable resources. Option C, minimizing the impacts on the natural environment. Option D is all of these. Okay, we have 2 votes for option B and 1 for option D. And the right option is actually option B, maximizing the use of non-renewable resources, right? So if you quickly answer, like it will be tempting to choose all of these because all these look at a quick glance, you may miss the nuances of the words used, right? So the question is asking, the principles of sustainability do not include, right? So we need to pick the one that that is unsustainable, right? So that's the important point. And then if you look at it, so the first one is protecting biodiversity. So that's a part of the sustainable development, right? So that will be in the basic principles. So option B is maximizing the use of non-renewable resources, right? So non-renewable resources, we want to minimize the use of them. Why? Because these are depletable, right? So it cannot be used forever, right? So therefore this cannot be part of our sustainable plans, right? So therefore we want to reduce the consumption of non-renewable resources. So option B is the opposite of what we want to achieve for sustainability. And option C, minimizing the impacts on the natural environment. Obviously we want to have minimal impact on our environment, and therefore C is part of the sustainable principles, right? So out of the given 3, it's only B that is against the principles of sustainability and therefore is not part of it, right? So therefore the right option is B, maximizing the use of non-renewable resources. Okay, now question number 7 is, which of the following factors causes unsustainable development? So the options are industrialization. Option B is depletion of non-renewable resources. Option C, population growth. And option D, all of these. Okay, we have 3 votes so far on the poll. Any other answers? Okay, 2 votes for option D, 1 for C. Okay, so let's take a look at the answer now. Okay, so the right option is option D. It is all of them, right? So here again we are talking about unsustainable development, right? So which of the given listed options lead to this, right? So which causes unsustainable development? So the first one, industrialization. So when you are talking about industrialization, we are talking about the ones that are the creating the pollution, right? So the polluting industries. So with industrialization we have, we have economic development. So we have large scale production, the economies of scale help us reduce the price, but also along with that comes, the pollution, right? So all different kinds of pollutions that we are seeing, air, water, land, and so on, right? So all of these is contributing to unsustainable development, right? So protection of environment is one of the goals that we have. Therefore, having more industrialization that are contributing to pollution is going to lead to unsustainable development, right? So A is one of the factors. So B is depletion of non-renewable resources, right? So non-renewable resources like fossil fuels, right? So again, because it's non-renewable, it's not sustainable in the long run, right? So therefore, as we saw earlier, one of the principles is to minimize the use of non-renewable resources. So but if we keep on depleting it, at a rate that at which it cannot be sustained, therefore more depletion leads to more unsustainable development. Option C, population growth. Again, it's not just population growth, but population growth that is that is going beyond our control, right? Unchecked population growth. So what comes with population? So you need some population growth because you need manpower. To for different activities that also contributes to your economic development. But at the same time, if you have exploding population, then the standard of living would go down, because if you are not able to provide the basic facilities for this population, right? So again, going back to the sustainable development goals, one of that is the health and well-being. So if you're not able to provide good health care, to all the population, right? So there is also the equitable access, right? So now it's not just one segment of the population gets all the facilities, but some segment is neglected, then that is also not sustainable development. So when you have unchecked population, it is difficult to meet the needs of everyone, right? So therefore that is also one of the factors which can lead to unsustainable development. Therefore it is all the three listed there. So the right option is D. All of these are the factors causing unsustainable development. Okay, so question number 8. is Draisian was the first two-wheeler invented by Carl Drais. So this is a statement. So we have to say whether the statement is true or false. Okay, so we have quite a few number of people who have joined now. So for those who joined now, so we have a poll going on after each question. A poll is created. So you can take a moment to read the question and then answer in the poll that is launched. Okay, so once everyone responds, we will discuss the answers. We have 5 responses so far. Any other answers? Is everyone able to access the poll? Anyone does not know where the polls are? So if you find the activities, menu in your Google Meet screen, so if you open that, within that activities, there will be a polls option menu, right? Within that, you'll be able to see all the polls that are being created. So there you can give your option. Okay, so we have 6 votes for option A. Yeah, so okay, let's take a look at the answer now. 7 votes, right? So the right option is option A. This is the given statement is true, right? So Draisian was invented by Carl Drais. It is the first two-wheeler that we know of, right? So going back to the history that we got to know in the lecture 1, right? So where we looked at the evolution of the different transport modes. So we looked at two-wheeler. So the first one was by Carl Drais. So he's a German, right? So and he came up with this model for a like a bicycle basically, right? So it was a wooden bicycle, but not the one that we are used to today. It didn't have any chains or anything. So basically the rider sits on the vehicle, but to propel the vehicle forward you need to push the ground, and to generate a force to make the vehicle move forward, right? So that was the earliest concept for a two-wheeler, right? So for the first bicycle, and it was by Carl Dreis, right? So that statement is true. Okay, so question number 9 is, which of the following is not a characteristic of living streets? So the options are preference to cars, green spaces, importance to children and old aged, and recreational spaces. I have 7 votes so far for option A. Just waiting for one more response. So you don't have to be worried about answering the polls. Like your responses are anonymous. I don't know who is choosing which option, and also you're not being evaluated, so you don't have to worry about any of that. So the more interactive you are, so the sessions will be much more better. So I request everyone to participate and in the polls. Any other answer? All right, so let's take a look at the answer now. So the right option is A, it's preference to cars. Right, so here we are talking about living streets. So what's the concept of a living street is basically, a street that you design with, the pedestrians and cyclists in mind, right? So basically, preference given to non-motorized modes of transport, and also the streets are designed in such a way that they act as social spaces, right? So that's the concept of a living street, right? So you have more greener environment, right? So all that. So and also there's it should be also accessible to everyone, right? So from young people to old people, disabled, so everyone should be able to use it without any issues, right? So that's the concept behind living streets. So the question is, which of the following is not a characteristic of it? So as we said, so it is focusing on non-motorized modes of transport. So cars, they do not come under that, so because they are motorized. So giving preference to cars is not really a characteristic of the living street. So it's option A. So if you look at the other option, so we'll be designing with green spaces. There'll be importance given to children and old aged, and there'll also be acting as social spaces. So there'll be recreational spaces as well, right? So that's the right option. So option A, it's preference to cars. It's not like there will not be any cars allowed on the streets. So cars and other motorized modes may be permitted, but they cannot be driving at higher speeds or anything. So they will have to be controlled and also driving at a lower speed, right? So therefore they are not given preference in these living streets. So therefore the right option is A, preference to cars. Okay, question number 10 is the development that meets the needs of the present, compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, is called sustainable development. So the options are true and false. So we have to say whether the statement is correct or not. Okay, so we have 7 votes for B, 1 for A. The right option is, it is B, it is false, right? So the given statement is not correct, right? So it may seem very true if you do not read it properly, right? So so I just recommend to everyone to just take a moment to carefully read all the statements. Okay, so it's easy to make a mistake because it's looking very similar to the definition that we have read in the the lecture, but just for a single change, right? So it is saying that the compromising the ability of the future generation, right? So that's not correct. So according to the actual definition, so it is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So that's the definition of sustainable development, right? So it's looking almost correct except for that one missing word, right? So that changes the meaning of the whole statement, right? So please take a moment, read it carefully, and don't make those simple mistakes. Okay, so this given statement is false, right? So it's so we should be able to meet the needs of the present, but we should also not deprive the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs, right? So which means that we should not consume more than what is needed, that needed for the future also. So we should consider the future aspect as well. So therefore that is a false statement. So question number 11, sustainable development requires an energy source that, you have to complete the statement. So option A is cannot be exhausted completely and cannot meet the growing demand. Option B, can be completely exhausted and can meet the growing demand. Option C, cannot be exhausted completely and can meet the growing demand. And option D is cannot destroy the environment and can be exhausted completely. So we have to pick one of these to complete that given statement. Okay, so we have 6 votes for option C, that it cannot be exhausted completely and can meet the growing demand. Okay, the right option is option C, that the energy source should not be exhausted completely and also meet the growing demand. So, right, so we are talking about an energy source that is sustainable, right? So sustainable means, so we have to number one is first we have to meet the demand, the present demand, right? So going back to the definition, we must be able to meet the demand that is there currently, so which is growing at a increasing rate. So we need to be able to meet the demand. So that's the first criteria. Second is, for it to be sustainable, it should be lasting forever, right? So lasting longer, right? So which means that we should not be able to exhaust that, right? So it should not get exhausted by our continuous use. So it should not be completely exhausted. So these two conditions that must be met for that energy source to be able to be used for sustainable development, right? So which is that source? It is all the non-renewable sources that we have, right? So that's why we prefer non-renewable sources, or we are moving towards non-renewable resources, because it is more sustainable than the fossil fuels that we are greatly dependent on today. Okay, therefore the right option is C. Okay, moving on to question number 12 is, we have two lists here, list 1 and list 2. We want to match the ones in list 1 with the correct pair in list 2. Okay, and we have some pre-populated matches. So the first match is A is matched with 3, B with 4, C with 2, and D with 1. So similarly we have 4 matches, so we have to pick one of these which is correct. Okay, so I'll create the poll. You can just read through the list. Okay, I have launched the poll. We'll just read the options, the ones in the list now. So in list one, we have, the different, transport modes that we saw from the history. So the first one is penny farthing bicycle, Tupolev Tu-144, Bombardier Global Express, and Maglev. And in the list two, we have twin engine, air cushion, James Starley, and breaking the sound barrier. Okay, so we want to match the mode with the most appropriate item given in list 2. Okay, we have 5 votes. Any other answers? Okay, so we have 6 votes, 4 of them choosing option A and 2 of them choosing option C. Okay, let's take a look at the answer now. Okay, so the right option is option C. So A 3, B 4, C 1, D 2. So that's the right matching. These again, it may be difficult to remember all of them, but there are some, interesting facts that are associated with, the different, inventions that we have gone through the history. So if you remember those, some of those interesting facts, it would be easier, right? So we looked at one of the earliest bicycles, the Draisy, right? So that was by Carl Drace. So that was invented in the early 1800s. But this penny farthing bicycle, this was invented by James Starley in the late 1800s, right? So if you so this is quite different from the design of cycles that we see, right? So while the earliest one by Carl Drace was similar to what we see today, this penny farthing bicycle is very different. So if you see the picture of it, you'll see that it has 2 wheels, but one is much larger than the other, right? So that's very unique about that bicycle that we have. So that's penny farthing bicycle, and it was invented by James Starley. So A is matched with 3. Right, the second one is Tupolev Tu-144. So this is a passenger aircraft, but the interesting fact about that is that it was the first passenger aircraft that broke the sound barrier. So what is this breaking the sound barrier? So you would have heard of this term called sonic boom, right? So when you travel at a speed greater than the speed of sound, so the effect that's caused is called the sonic boom, right? So this breaking the sound barrier means when you travel at a speed greater than the speed of sound, right? So generally that is called as traveling at more than Mach 1. So Mach 1 is what is the speed of sound. So if you travel at a speed larger than that, so that means that you're traveling at more than Mach 1, right? So this was the first passenger aircraft that was able to break the sound barrier, right? So that's B matched with option 4. And C, Bombardier Global Express. So this was another aircraft, but it's a business class jet. So that was the first one to have twin engine, and therefore it had a large flight range, right? So C is matched with 1 twin engine, and D is Maglev. So we already looked at Maglev and how it works, right? So in one of the earlier questions, so magnetic levitation, that's the short, that's abbreviated as Maglev. So that gives the air cushion between the vehicle and the track, reducing the friction and making it able to travel faster. So option D is matched with 2 air cushion. So that right matching is given in option C, A3, B4, C1 and D2. Okay, so the right option is C. Okay, question number 13 is dash is R not part of the transportation systems. So so we have 4 components given here: airport, oil pipeline, walking, push scooters. So out of these 4, which one of them is not a part of the transportation system? So the options are both 1 and 2, only 2, all options 1, 2, 3 and 4, and none of these. Okay, so we have to choose one from A, B, C or D. Okay, so take a moment to think carefully and yeah, respond in the poll. Okay, any other answers? I have 6 votes. Okay, we'll take a look at the answer. We have a majority going with option B, only oil pipeline, and there's a single response for option D, none of these. And but the right option is it is option D, none of these. Right. So whatever is given in the four option the four components, 1, 2, 3, 4, are all part of the transportation systems. Right. So they all make up the transportation system. So maybe surprising for you, but according to the definition, so how do we define a transportation system? So the different components are of a transportation system or everything that you see, that's enabling the transport of people and goods, and also the interaction between these components that's enabling this mobility. So they all those make up the transportation system, right? So you have the demand, so which is the people and goods that need to be transported, right? So you have the infrastructure which enables which enables the transportation modes to move around, the transportation modes themselves. So we have different forms of them, right? So all these together make up the transportation system, right? So without any of them, we do not have a need for the system, or the system cannot function, right? So for the first one, airport, so it's part of the transportation infrastructure, right? So it provides you a space for the passengers to arrive, and also for the airport and also for the aircrafts to land and take off. So bringing these supply and demand together is this airport infrastructure. So it's part of the transportation system. Oil pipeline, so again it's part of the transportation system, right? So I told it's about moving not only people but also goods, right? So transportation system is also about moving goods as well. So oil is one of the goods that we want to transport. So oil pipelines enable us to do that. So oil pipelines are also part of the transportation system. So right, so it's not just the motorized forms that we see, it's also these pipelines also making a part of this transportation system. Walking, one of the non-motorized modes, right? So most eco-friendly. So it's also part of the transportation system. Push scooters, it's a transport mode, right? So it's also a component of the system. So all these four are part of the transportation system, right? So the question is asking which of these is not a part. So all these are part of the system. Therefore, the right option is option D, none of these. Okay. So moving on to question number 14. So we have three statements given here. So the first statement is sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Statement 2 is by adopting sustainable measures, natural resources can be conserved and alternate sources of power can be used without harming the environment. And statement 3 is sustainable development measures can make a human settlement or habitat self-sufficient. So we have to choose one of the options. So the option 1 is all statements 1, 2, 3 are true. Only statement 1 is true. Statements 2 and 3 are false. Only statement 3 is false. Right. So read the statements again. Think about each of them and then pick one of the options. Any other answers? Okay, so we have 6 votes for option A, that all the 3 statements are true. So let's take a look at the right one. The right one is option A, that all statements 1, 2, and 3 are true. Right? So because different combinations of statements are being discussed about in the option, so we need to know about each of the statements, whether they are true or not. Right? So we'll look at each of them. By this time it should have been easier for you because we have talked about all these concepts earlier. So the first one is the definition, the popular definition that we have discussed before. So it's a sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, right? So this time it is correct because it says without compromising, right? So statement 1 is true. Statement 2 is by adopting sustainable measures, natural resources can be conserved and alternate sources of power can be used without harming the environment, right? So this is also true, right? So one of the goals of sustainable measures is to focus on the energy resources, right? So we should not deplete the natural resources, which is the uh, non-renewable natural resources, specifically like the fossil fuels, and also we're looking for alternate sources because we need to still meet the energy demand, right? So by not using fossil fuels, just by not using fossil fuels not going to do us any good. We also have to meet the demand, so we need to look
Excuse
for.
me, sir, you're muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, are you able to hear me now? I'm audible, right? No?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, so I was just going through the statements, right? Discussing whether each of them is true or not, because we have different combinations of the statements given. We should know about each of them, whether they are true or not. So the statement 1, so we have already discussed about this. So this is the popular definition of sustainable development. So we have discussed this. The first one, sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, right? So this time the definition given is correct because it has the it does not miss the word without, right? So this time it is correct. Statement 2 is by adopting sustainable measures, natural resources can be conserved and alternate sources of power can be used without harming the environment, right? So this is also true. So we have looked at sustainable measures and sustainable principles, right? So one of the principle is to minimize the use of depletable non-renewable resources, right? So when you are taking, so when we are doing that, we are conserving the natural resources, right? But by doing so is not enough. Just doing or minimizing the use of fossil fuels or other forms of non-renewable resources is not enough, because we have to still meet the present needs of energy, right? So for that we have to look for alternate sources. So these alternate sources again should not be polluting, should not be completely exhaustible. So these alternate sources of power should be looked for that can be used without harming the environment. So this statement is also true for sustainable development. And statement 3 is sustainable development measures can make a human settlement or habitat self-sufficient. So this is also true. So because by sustainable development, so we have, for sustainable development we have to look at all the different goals that we have for the sustainable development. So these again cover a wide variety of aspects. So from the social aspects, the human aspects, so like no poverty, no hunger, good education, well-being, healthcare, right? And to the environmental aspects, right? So looking at pollution, climate change, the life, life other than humans, life on aquatic life on land, and so on. So we are taking care of all these aspects when we say we are making sustainable development. So when we do that, so the human settlement or the habitat will be self-sufficient, right? So because we are not harming the environment that we are living in, and we are also the social equitable aspects are also taken care of. So in that way we'll be self-sufficient. So all the three statements are true, and therefore the right option is A. Okay, question number 15 is predicting the risk assessment scenario is a requisite for the development of any policy measures for sustainable development. So we have to say whether the statement is true or not. Okay, any other answers? All right, so let's take a look at the answer now. So the right option is option A. The given statement is true. Okay, so what it says is predicting the risk assessment scenario is the requisite for the development of any policy measures for sustainable development, right? So if you think about it logically, it makes sense, right? So you are bringing a policy, right? So that, you say it enables sustainable development, right? So, but like, anything that we bring, so also has some negative side effects, right? So that we have to be, mindful of, right? So for example, let us say you are looking at the city's traffic, and then you see a lot of congestion and pollution created, right? So you want to alleviate that. So you are proposing a policy, so you want to improve the public transportation system so that people do not use too much of private vehicle, right? So you are proposing a bus rapid transit system, right? For that you may provide exclusive bus lanes, right? But for doing that, so you say that will make the system more sustainable, right? So we will be reducing the private vehicle usage. It all looks good, but what is the downside of it? So for example, for developing that, you will need exclusive bus lanes, and for doing that, you will need to, so maybe acquire more land, right? So for, providing that additional bus lane. So you will be acquiring more land. So that may involve, destroying, trees that are around the, roads, right? So that is something that we that is impacting the sustainability aspect of it, right? So you should be able to predict what is the negatives that are associated with it, right? So maybe in the long run, this may lead to more sustainability, what the solution or the policy that we are proposing, but we should be first able to predict that and prove that it or make sure that it does so, because once we implement it in field, it is very difficult to reverse the effects, right? So therefore, before doing any of these or implementing any of these policies, it is required that we need to properly predict what is the risk associated with it. Therefore, we are not doing anything that's unsustainable and harmful, right? So therefore it is true. So question number 16 is, what can be inferred from the graph shown? So here's a graph shown. So on the y-axis, we have the different categories of vehicles as percentages of the total registered motor vehicle. And on the x-axis, we have different years. So basically each point on each line is how many percentage of vehicles of that category were registered in the country in that particular year. For example, this dark blue line represents two-wheelers. So in the year 1951, so the number of two-wheelers in the country was 11.1% of the total number of vehicles, right? So we have this information for different types of classes of vehicles throughout the different years, okay? So, and we have three different inferences given to us, and we have to say which of these inferences are correct, right? So option A is two-wheelers account for the major share of road transportation. Option B is the percentage share of two-wheelers was approximately equal to the composition of cars, jeeps, and taxis in the 1970s. Option C is, though the composition of private vehicles has declined in comparison to the other modes, the registered vehicles have increased in the 20th century. Option D is all A, B, C are true. Option E is only A and B are true. Okay, so I'm not sure if the graph is legible. I'll just show this dark blue line is two-wheelers. This red line is cars, jeeps, and taxis. This green line is for buses. This purple line is for goods vehicle, and this other light blue line is for other vehicles. So the numbers don't matter. You just have to look at the trend and then read the statements and think whether they are correct or not. We have 6 votes. This time the responses are varied. So we have 3 votes for A. We have 1 vote for D, that all A, B, C are true, and 2 votes for E, that only A and B are true. Okay, so people are not very sure about C. Okay. Any other answers? Okay. One more vote for option D. Okay. Okay, I think we can take a look at the answer now. Right. So before let's just walk through each of these options and see whether they are true or not. Okay, we'll just compare it with the graph. So first option says that two-wheelers account for the major share of road transportation, right? So let's just see. So which means it's not saying about any particular year. So we'll assume it's for the current year, right? So we are talking about the present. So two-wheelers account for the major share of road transport. So which is the latest data point is on the rightmost one, because the year is in the increasing order, right? So so this is a little bit older data, but still it holds true. So we see that clearly two-wheelers are the largest fraction of the registered motor vehicles in the country, right? So more than almost 3/4 of all the vehicles registered are two-wheelers, right? So therefore the first option is a correct inference from the graph given. So option B is the percentage share of two-wheelers was approximately equal to the composition of cars, jeeps and taxis in the 1970s. So we should look at the year 1970. So here is 1970. So if you look at that, so we are talking about two-wheelers and the cars, jeeps and taxis. So two-wheelers is the blue line, cars, jeeps and taxis is the red line. And we see approximately in the 1970s, these two are crossing each other, which means in the 70s, the composition of these two classes of vehicles were approximately the same, right? So they are having around 35 or so percentage, and they were almost equal. So option B is also a correct inference from the graph. Now coming to option C, it says though the composition of the private vehicles has declined in comparison to the other modes, the registered vehicles have increased in the 20th century, right? So 20th century. So we are talking about the 20th century, which is still the 2000s, right? So that's the 20th century. So though the composition of private vehicles has decreased. So what is the private vehicles? So which means the cars, jeeps and taxis together with two-wheelers. So these are your private vehicles, right? So the blue and the red line together are the private vehicles. So the others are buses, goods vehicle and other vehicles. So that we are not considering as private modes. So the first two are private modes. So here it says the composition of the private vehicles has declined in the 20th century. Is that true? So composition, what do we mean by that? So if you, for example, let us take 100 vehicles randomly, right? So let us pick 100 vehicles randomly in a particular area. So the composition is basically how many of these 100 vehicles belong to one particular type. So how many of these are cars, how many of these are jeeps, how many of these are taxis, and how many of these are two-wheelers, right? So that's your composition. So what it's saying is this composition of private vehicles is declining. So do we see that? So what we are seeing is that the taxis, cars and jeeps, so their percentages are going down, whereas the percentage of two-wheelers are increasing. So which means that there's a higher chance of the vehicle that you're going to just select is a two-wheeler, right? So which means that most of these are going to be two-wheelers, and the other modes of private vehicles are declining, right? So it's becoming more and more unimode, right? So there's only one type of mode that we are seeing more and more, which are the two-wheelers, right? So that's correct. And also there is a second part to this, is that the registered vehicles have increased in the 20th century. So that is also true. So overall we are seeing that the other vehicles are decreasing, right? So like the taxis, the buses, the goods vehicles, while these are decreasing, the two-wheelers are increasing at a much higher rate, right? So they are making up more than for the decline in the other modes. So while the other modes are decreasing, the two-wheelers are increasing at a much higher rate. So therefore the overall number of vehicles that we have is going up, right? So therefore both the parts are correct. So C is also a correct statement. So option D says all A, B, C are true. Therefore, that is the right option, option D. Okay, so going to question number 17. Which of the following GHG, greenhouse gas, is a critical pollutant in terms of its 100-year global warming potential? Okay, so the first one is carbon dioxide, second one is nitrous oxide, third is methane, and fourth is water vapor. Okay, we have 7 votes major for option B and a couple of votes each for option A and option C. Okay, any other answers? All right, let's take a look at the right one. So the right option is actually option B. It is nitrous oxide. That's much more critical when we look at it at a large scale in terms of the number of years. So what is this global warming 100-year global warming potential? So how it is defined is, so you take 1 ton of carbon dioxide, right? So carbon dioxide, so it's a greenhouse gas, it traps energy, right? So that's the greenhouse gas. So that's how it's responsible for global warming. So you take 1 ton of carbon dioxide, so it has some capacity to trap the energy, right? So let us take take that value to be 1. Okay, so whatever it is, let's put it on a different scale where that value is 1. Now with respect to this, so you take another greenhouse gas, say nitrous oxide. So 1 ton of nitrous oxide, what is the amount of energy that it can trap, right? So with respect to carbon dioxide, how much more energy that it is going to trap? So that is that particular gas's global warming potential, 100-year global warming potential, right? So in 100 years, how much of it can trap? More than carbon dioxide. So that's the 100-year global warming potential. So which means carbon dioxide is our baseline. So whatever it can capture, so that's taken as 1. And with respect to that, we are looking at other gases. So we have other gases, nitrous oxide, methane, and water vapor, right? So water vapor we can directly eliminate. So some of you may not think of it as a greenhouse gas, right? But it is also a greenhouse gas. It can also trap heat, but not really critical that we need to be worried about. We have other more critical ones, right? So water vapor we can eliminate. So nitrous oxide and methane. So methane is also much more dangerous in terms of its 100-year GWP, right? So it is more than 20 times or about 25 times than carbon dioxide. It has potential to absorb that much more energy than carbon dioxide. Whereas if you look at nitrous oxide, it's even more dangerous, more than 200 times, about 230 or so, right? So it is much more, it has much more potential to capture this, trap the heat or other, other energy, right? So therefore, it is much more critical than carbon dioxide if you look at it on a larger scale, on a longer time period. So for 100 years, if you are going to have the same amount of carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide is going to cause more harm than carbon dioxide does. Okay, so therefore, looking at this particular factor of 100-year GWP, so nitrous oxide is therefore the most critical pollutant. It doesn't mean others are, we can release other gases. It's just relatively nitrous oxide is much more dangerous in terms of this 100-year GWP. Okay, that's why the option B is correct. Okay, question number 18, similar one. So which of the following greenhouse gas is the critical pollutant in terms of radiative forcing? So the options are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, water vapor. Okay, it's the same set of greenhouse gases, but now we are looking at a different criteria, radiative forcing. Any other answers? Okay, we have 6 votes for option A, carbon dioxide. Right, so let's take a look at the answer now. So the right option is option A, carbon dioxide. Right. So here we are talking about the criticality of a pollutant in terms of its radiative forcing. So what is radiative forcing? So we know that energy. One form in which energy can be transferred is through radiation. Right. So here we are talking about this radiative transfer. So we have both energy coming in to the earth and also energy leaving the earth in terms of radiation, right? So primarily from the sun, we are receiving the heat energy, right? And there is also a cooling effect when energy leaves from the surface of the earth into the space, right? So there is both energy coming in and also going out through radiation. So this radiative forcing is nothing but the difference between this energy that's coming in and the energy that's leaving earth, right? So if you have more energy coming in than energy that's leaving, then that's called as positive radiative forcing, right? Which means some of the energy is trapped. And when you have negative radiative forcing, it means that more energy is leaving than what is coming in, which leads to cooling down the earth, right? So positive radiative forcing will lead to warming the earth, and negative radiative forcing will lead to a cooling effect, right? So here we are talking about GHGs in terms of the radiative forcing. So GHGs, what they will do, they will have positive radiative forcing because they are going to trap the heat, and therefore the energy that's coming in will be more than what's going to be going out because some of it is trapped because of the greenhouse gases. So they will be leading to this global warming. So in terms of this effect, if you look at it, then if you carbon dioxide is the one that has that has a larger positive radiative forcing effect than the other ones that are listed here, right? So therefore in terms of this effect, carbon dioxide is much more critical than the others, right? So, but over a long period, that's where the 100-year GWP was there. So with the same amount of gas, there will be more effect from the nitrous oxide compared to carbon dioxide. But in terms of just the radiative forcing that we are looking at, so it has contributed, the largest contribution to the increase in the temperature, global temperature, is from the carbon dioxide. So therefore that's more critical. So the right option is option A, carbon dioxide. Okay, question number 19 is, in India, the growth in the urban road infrastructure is almost dash that of the registered vehicles in the last decade. Options are twice, half, triple, and one third. So we are looking at the growth rates of the transportation infrastructure and the number of vehicles that are registered. So we want to know what is the relationship between these growth rates. Okay, any other answers? So we have a majority going for 1/3, one option for twice, and one for half. Any other responses? Okay, so let's take a look at the answer. So the right answer is option B. It is half, right? So here we are looking at uh, what is the urban road infrastructure growth in terms of the growth of the registered vehicles, right, in the last decade alone. Okay, so if you look at this, so basically, if you know what's the roughly what is the growth rate, so you will know that the urban road infrastructure is basically lower. The growth in the urban road infrastructure is lower than the registered vehicle growth, right? So we know that so because the number of vehicles that are being bought registered is growing much faster than what the infrastructure being is being developed, right? So it's not able to simply catch up with the rate at which the vehicles are growing, so that there is more demand, there's less supply, so that's resulting in a lot of these negative externalities that we know of in all the urban areas today, right? So which is increasing congestion, pollution, accidents, and so on, simply because there's not adequate infrastructure to cater to the demand that we are having today, right? So which helps us remove two of these four options, which are option A and C, twice and triple. So those are not applicable, right? So directly we can remove that. So only we have to decide between half and 1/3. So if you just look at the numbers, then it is roughly half, because the register vehicles have been growing, have grown by about some 200 odd percentage, 220 or 230 percentage, whereas if you look at the road infrastructure growth, it is only about 110 or 115 percentage in just the last decade, so which is roughly half of the vehicular growth, right? So therefore the right option is option B, it is half. Okay, question number 20 is, which of the transportation sectors is the major contribution to greenhouse gas emissions? So option A is waterborne navigation, option B is civil aviation, option C is road transport, and option D is railways. Okay, we have 7 votes all for road transport. Okay, we have 7 votes all for road transport. Okay, let's take a look at the answer. So right option is option C, road transport. So everyone was correct. So yeah, again, looking at the different sectors. So waterborne navigation is one of the most fuel efficient, forms of the transportation, of the modes of transportation, right? So therefore, the pollution, when you're talking about in terms of GHG, it will be the least in terms of the contribution. So among the rest, so civil aviation is one of the highest contributors, but the road transport is the major one, right? So if you look at the different ones, road transportation would clearly top the chart, but civil aviation is also, air transport is also a fuel demanding mode of transportation. Railways can still take require more energy, but still it is much lesser than what we will require for form of transport, or the road transport. Road transport, because of its just sheer number, and also because it's much more fossil fuel dependent, right? So now, as we are slowly moving towards EV, we are trying to improve the situation, by promoting public transport as well. But at the moment, we have a lot of private vehicles, and also most of these are, petrol or diesel based, and therefore they are most, fuel hungry, and also contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions. So by just the sheer volume, road transport is the most are the major contributor for the greenhouse gas emissions among the different sectors. So option C. So question number 21 is, which of the following public transit system is most suitable for serving the demand in the range of about 50,000 to 70,000 passengers per hour per direction? So we have different transit systems: BRT, Bus Rapid Transit; MRT, Mass Rapid Transit; Monorail; and LRT, or Light Rail Transit. Okay, so which of these is suitable when we are dealing with demand in the range of 50,000 to 70,000 passengers per hour? Okay, 6 responses for option B. Any other answers? Okay, so let's take a look at the answer. So the right option is option B, MRT, right? So it's much easier. The name itself is a giveaway. So the mass in the mass rapid transit refers to the high capacity that these systems have to transport the passengers, right? So it has a much higher capacity. That's why the name mass rapid transit. So you can transport a large number of people quickly between 2 points. So that's why it's mass rapid transit, right? So here we are talking about a suitable system for a really large demand, right? So 50 to 70,000 passengers in 1 hour if you want to transport in a single direction, right? So that's a really high demand, right? So to cater to this, we need a system that has a fairly high capacity, right? So if you look at these different transit systems, so you have the bus rapid transit, so which is like one of the least among all these different options that we have, right? So then we have the monorail and light rail. So these are somewhat in the intermediate range, their capacities. They are more than bus rapid transit, but still not really high to cater to this demand. So it is only the mass rapid transit, like your metro systems, so that can serve this high demand of passengers, satisfactorily, right? So that's why the mass rapid transit is the right option. But when we are considering the demand here, so with that we choose the mass rapid transit as the most suitable. But there is the other aspect, which is cost, that also may be a factor that we have to consider, right? So just by looking at demand, so we worked with capacity and said mass rapid transit is suitable, but the cost is also high when you are going for mass rapid transit, right? So BRTs cannot be that cost heavy, but whereas mass rapid transit are really much you need a higher budget when you are going for these systems. So there is a trade-off that you have to make between how much you are able to spend versus how much you can improve the transportation system in terms of serving this high demand. So the trade-off is there, but just by looking at the capacity, which is what we are worried about in this particular question, so mass rapid transit is the most suitable for this one. Okay, so that's the right option. So this was the last question for this particular session. So if you have any questions, you can ask. I'll be happy to answer. Okay, so if you do not have any questions, so you can feel free to log off. We can meet again same time next week, Sunday 4 to 6. So we'll have these sessions regularly every week, covering the questions from the concepts that were taught in that particular week. So if you have any doubts or questions, you can get it cleared, and I hope that doing these assignments help you in solving the actual assignment for the course. Okay, so and thank you for attending. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, otherwise you may log out. Thank you.